Welcome back to our studios here in Lahore. I'm Hamza Amjad. Now, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the world must see and speak out against India's fascism in occupied Kashmir. Addressing the 56th Convention of the Islamic Society of North America, Khan said India is following Nazi ideology in Kashmir. Khan asked the forum to expose India's brutalities in the locked-down valley and call for action against its inhumane acts. He said the Western world need to understand the RSS's extremist Hindutva ideology to clearly understand the Kashmir issue. Khan said Muslims and other minorities across India are being persecuted because of this fascist Hindutva ideology. He asked the forum to highlight Islam's true message of peace and tolerance to the West. Khan warned that India is planning to launch a false flag operation like Pulwama to divert the world's attention. The UN has asked India to ensure no one is left stateless after New Delhi revoked the citizenship of around 2 million Muslims yesterday. Expressing concern over the development, UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi said such policies will be a huge blow to the fight against statelessness. Meanwhile, the Indian government is facing a severe backlash over the list, including from within its own ranks. The ruling BJP's Assam President Ranjit Kumar Das has criticized the action, saying he does not trust the government. Meanwhile, US Senator and presidential candidate Bernie Sanders has said India's actions in occupied Kashmir are unacceptable. He was addressing the 56th Convention of the Islamic Society of North America in the US city of Houston. Sanders said the crackdown in Kashmir in the name of security violates local citizens' basic rights. He said the communications blockade in Jammu and Kashmir must be lifted immediately.
India's action is unacceptable. The communications blockade must be lifted immediately.
Now, Sanders also called on Washington to support a UN-backed peaceful resolution that respects the will of the Kashmiri people. Moving on, Indian media says the situation in occupied Kashmir is fastly getting out of India's hand despite the crushing curfew. In an opinion piece, the Indian Express wrote that reports of violence by Indian military in the territory are increasing. The leading Indian newspaper asked the government long the ongoing lockdown and communications blackout can be sustained. It said life in Kashmir is paralyzed, with markets, schools and public transport shut down. India's curfew and communications blackout in the occupied valley has now entered its 28th day. In Yemen, the Saudi-led coalition airstrikes killed 60 people in western Damar city. Houthi spokesperson Mohammed Abdul Salam said 50 others were wounded in the attack on a detention center. But the coalition says it targeted a rebel military position that stores drones and missiles. The rebel-run media says over 180 war prisoners were detained in the center, and they were waiting for their release as part of a prisoner swap deal with the Yemeni government. The Taliban have launched an attack on Baghlan province's capital, Puli Khumri, after attacking Kunduz on Saturday. A police spokesman says gun battles continue on the city's outskirts. The Afghan Interior Ministry says security forces have contained the Taliban in one area. Locals say clashes are underway near the governor's compound and police headquarters. The Taliban and government officials have confirmed more fighting is underway in the central Ghazni and Laghman provinces. Earlier, the ministry said 36 Taliban fighters and 10 Afghan soldiers were killed in clashes in Kunduz. Meanwhile, US envoy Zalmay Khalilzad said Washington and the Taliban are at the threshold of a peace agreement. Khalilzad said the 9th round of talks with the group has concluded in Doha. Over in Hong Kong, demonstrators have blocked routes to the territory's international airport after a chaotic night of clashes with the police. Now, on Saturday, the security forces used tear gas, rubber bullets and water cannons to disperse crowds. Protest organizers have asked the public to overpower roads and rail links to the airport to disrupt flights. The mass transit railway operator says trains to the airport have been suspended as protesters threatened to disrupt transport links. Police say 40 prominent activists were arrested during last night's clashes. Earlier, demonstrators lit fires through petrol bombs at riot police and attacked the Parliament building. Protests erupted in the Asian financial hub against a controversial extradition bill back in June. Now, 5 people have been killed and 21 others wounded in a mass shooting in the U.S. state of Texas. Police said the suspect, identified as a white male in his 30s, was shot dead in a gun battle with officers. Odessa City Police Chief Michael Gerke said the attacker shot motorists, shoppers and police officers during the car chase. Gerke said the gunman hijacked a postal van and police believe the postal worker is among the victims. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence said the FBI is already assisting local law enforcement in the investigation.
I just spoke to the president, and he's at Camp David, and he's closely monitoring the developments in the investigation in the mass shooting in Odessa. Our hearts go out to all the victims, families who had loved ones lose their lives.
As of now, the police chief has declined to comment on the motive of the shooting. Now let's move on. Iran has threatened France, saying it will scale back its nuclear deal commitments even further unless Europe fulfills its obligations. President Hassan Rouhani says the contents of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action are irreversible. In a telephone conversation, Rouhani asked French President Emmanuel Macron to commit to the JCPOA's articles. Macron expressed hopes of bringing Tehran and Washington together for talks. Tensions between the two countries spiked after the US unilaterally withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal last year. Iran has accused the US of engaging in piracy and threats to prevent it from selling oil. Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo should stop nagging Iran. Foreign Minister Zarif says Iran will sell oil to all buyers. Earlier, Pompeo claimed the recently released Iranian oil tanker is heading towards Syria. The US Treasury Department has blacklisted the tanker Adrian Daria and imposed sanctions on its captain. The vessel was seized by Gibraltar in July on suspicion of violating EU sanctions on Syria. Hezbollah says it has decided to respond to Israel's recent drone attack on its offices in Lebanon. In a televised address, Chief Hassan Nasrallah said Hezbollah has enough precision-guided missiles to confront Israel. Nasrallah accused Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of seeking a pretext to attack Hezbollah. He said Israel must pay a price for their attack on southern Beirut that damaged a Hezbollah-run media center. Israel and Hezbollah, which last fought a war in 2006, are on high alert after Tel Aviv's drone attack. Meanwhile, Israel's military says it has ordered extra forces to be deployed to its border with Lebanon. The Israeli military says its ground forces, air, navy and intelligence forces have improved their preparedness in the area. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he intends to annex major parts of the occupied West Bank. Netanyahu had pledged the step in his election bid 5 months earlier, but did not give a time frame. Speaking in the West Bank settlement of El Qana, he vowed to extend Jewish sovereignty to all settlements as part of the State of Israel. Palestine has repeatedly voiced fears that Netanyahu will annex the region with possible backing from US President Donald Trump. Now, Russia says US airstrikes in Syria's Idlib de-escalation zone is a breach of previous agreements. US forces struck an al-Qaeda facility, killing 50 militants, hours after a Russian-backed ceasefire took hold. Russia's defense ministry says the US did not forewarn either Moscow or Ankara about the strikes. The ministry said Russian and Syrian warplanes have not carried out any raids in the region recently. Earlier, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the missile targeted militants' leaders at a meeting in a training camp. The al-Qaeda-linked Huras al-Din and their allies Ansar al-Tawhid are active in the region. In Turkey, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has threatened to launch an operation in Northeast Syria if Turkish troops do not control a safe zone. Ankara and Washington agreed to set up a safe zone to minimize tensions between Turkey and US-backed Kurdish forces in Syria. An operations center has been set up and joint patrols are expected to start soon. Since last year, Erdogan has threatened to launch an assault against the YPG, which is an offshoot of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in Syria. Meanwhile, 5 Kurdistan Workers' Party militants have been killed by Turkey in a counter-terror operation in northern Iraq. The Turkish Defense Ministry says the airstrikes destroyed a weapons cache and shelters used by the PKK. The ministry says the air raids on Metina, Avasin Basyan and Gara regions were conducted in coordination with Operation Claw. It says Turkey will continue destroying weapon emplacements and shelters used by the terrorists. Ankara accuses the PKK of killing 40,000 people during the insurgency it launched in 1978. And with that, we're going to take a short break, but don't go anywhere. More stories to follow. Welcome back. Now, Poland's President Andrzej Duda says Western sanctions against Russia over its annexation of Crimea should continue. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is visiting Poland to mark 80 years since the outbreak of World War II. President Duda said Ukraine should have closer relations with the European Union and NATO. The EU and the United States have imposed sanctions on Russia over its role in the Ukraine conflict. Meanwhile, U.S. Energy Secretary Rick Perry says Washington will continue to toughen sanctions on Russia. Perry was speaking in Warsaw after meeting Polish and Ukrainian lawmakers. 2 states in eastern Germany will elect new members of their parliaments today. Opinion polls say the anti-immigrant right wing is expected to make gains in the elections. Polls predict a neck-and-neck race between the Social Democrat Party and the AfD in Brandenburg. In Saxony, the far-right party is aiming to topple the Christian Democrats-led government. Electoral success for the far-right AfD will represent a major setback to mainstream political parties. It can push the governing Christian Democrats to the right as they seek to win over AfD voters. Surveys say results can threaten Chancellor Angela Merkel's coalition with the centre-left Social Democrats. Pope Francis has been rescued by firefighters after he was stuck in an elevator for almost half an hour. Francis apologized to the crowd in St. Peter's Square, Vatican City, for arriving late for his weekly address. He explained that there was an electrical power problem in the Vatican which caused him to stay stuck. During his address, the Pope thanked the firefighters for rescuing him from the claustrophobic predicament. In his Sunday sermon, he asked world leaders to take drastic measures to address the global climate emergency. Now, changing its course, Hurricane Durian is expected to slam the Bahamas today as a dangerous Category 5 storm. Torrential rain, high waves and damaging winds are feared as the storm takes aim at the U.S. mainland. Bahamas Prime Minister Hubert Minnis has asked residents and tourists to head for the main island. The National Hurricane Center said Durian is packing winds with a maximum speed of about 240 kilometers per hour. Despite the more favorable forecast for Florida now, authorities have told people to remain vigilant. Due to a slow westward motion, Durian is predicted to stay longer at the Bahamas, wreaking havoc. After churning over the Bahamas, it is expected to veer northwest and may spare Florida a direct hit.
Understand, even if it doesn't directly strike Florida, this is a big, powerful storm. You're still looking at really significant storm surge on the east coast of Florida. You're looking at major flooding events in different parts of the state.
Meanwhile, firefighters continue to struggle to contain the Amazon wildfires. Not only do they face difficulty because of high temperatures and strong winds, firefighters and police trying to extinguish the blaze have also been shot at by loggers. More in this report.
There has been no rain in the Brazilian Amazon in 3 months. The dry conditions have led to the emergence of new fire points. As such, despite the firefighters' efforts, extinguished fires keep reappearing.
Though it's not been burnt, this piece of forest is likely to burn up because some smoke from fire could be seen in the distance and nobody is fighting with the fire there. The fire will soon spread here if no one goes to put it out, as the temperature is high and the wind is strong. It may burn this whole piece of forest together.
Natural conditions aren't the only problem. Officers on duty in the jungle also report being shot at by suspected loggers. The suspects got away, but the police were still able to destroy their equipment.
The joint operation between Obama and the federal police found an illegal operation in the Altamara municipality in Para in an area of about 2 hectares. Machinery was seized in this operation.
Illegal logging, farming and mining has despoiled nearly 12,000 square kilometers in the Amazon just this year. Wildfires in the rainforest have also surged by 83% since January. Critics of Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro blame his climate policies for encouraging the damage.
In Bangladesh, the death toll from the dengue outbreak has jumped to 126 over the past 2 months. The health department says over 70,000 people have been affected by dengue so far this year. It says over 750 have been diagnosed with the disease in the past 24 hours. The department says around 5,000 patients are currently being treated in hospitals across the country. Now, fans of the augmented reality phone game Harry Potter Wizards Unite are enjoying their very first festival. Witches and wizards in attendance roam a park decorated with all things Harry Potter in Indianapolis. Let's take a look.
If you missed out on your Hogwarts letter as a child, don't worry, you can still become a wizard. Just report to Indianapolis White River State Park for the Harry Potter Wizards Unite Fan Festival.
All of our inspirations for the game really drive from the incredible body of work of J.K. Rowling. We spend most of our time when we should be working, reading, watching and just really soaking in the world. We wanted to make a kind of modern game for people today.
A calamity has overtaken the wizarding world. Thousands of witches and wizards from around the world have flew to the expensive park to avert disaster.
It's a great experience. It's a good community. Definitely a lot of fun just to get out and do something a little bit different. And really experience and immerse yourself. You become a wizard. It's what everybody wants when they watch the movies or read the books.
The golden snitch is not the only prize at stake. Wizards and witches use their vans or phones to discover never before seen oddities through the app.
It's constantly changing. So there's always different tasks and events to do, so it keeps you enticed versus other games where it can get a little mundane towards the end.
If players manage to return 150,000 dragons between them, a Global Day of Dragons event will unlock for September the 7th. The festival in Indiana runs from August the 31st to September 1st.
Well, first up in the world of business, China and the US have hit each other with fresh tariffs as the trade war between the world's top 2 economies worsens. This latest escalation comes even though the 2 countries hinted at the resumption of talks. Beijing levied up to 10% tariffs on over 1,500 items originating from the US. The new round of duties has hit Washington's crude oil. Meanwhile, the US has announced 15% tariffs on more than $125 billion of Chinese imports. This is the first phase of the US plan to place 15% duties on $300 billion of Chinese imports by the end of this year. Beijing has called on both sides to continue trade negotiations, saying it has ample resources to retaliate. And of course, as this economic war worsens, it becomes difficult to say who is winning the battle. Now, while the recent numbers out of Beijing suggest it has its nose in front, Washington insists it is dealing heavy damage. Find out.
President Donald Trump told the American people last month that the trade war was hurting China more than the US, but the recent data from the two countries suggests otherwise. A report saying Beijing's 6 major banks performed better than last year despite the economic gridlock with Washington. Shanghai Development Bank Vice President Wang Xinhao said operating revenue and profit both registered a 2-digit sharp increase. Bank of China Chief Risk Officer Liu Jiadong says the risk control of the Chinese banks has also enhanced.
For the key areas including real estate and industries with excess production capacity, we will keep screening the risks against them, make clear of the situation, follow up on the latest development, and diffuse the potential risks in advance.
Meanwhile, China Enterprise Confederation released the 2019 China Top 500 Enterprises list today. The enterprises in the list posed a record gross operation revenue of over $11 trillion, over $1.5 trillion more than last year. China Enterprise Confederation's Vice Chairman Zhen Hongren says the economy is undergoing major changes unseen in a century.
In the course of China's integration into the world, the Belt and Road Initiative has opened a very important path of internationalization for us. Through benign competition, we can jointly seek a development model leading to mutual benefit and a win-win outcome.
U.S. consumer sentiment in August registered the sharpest monthly decline in nearly 7 years. A University of Michigan report released this week said trade wars, tariff hikes have stirred worry, skepticism in the US. The index of consumer sentiment has dived nearly 9 points, the largest monthly decline since December 2012. While it is difficult to call the winner of this trade war, the World Bank and International Monetary Fund have already called the ultimate loser global economy.
Well, it was pouring down earlier here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. And that was all I have from the news bulletin at the moment. Do stay tuned to Indus News for further updates. As always, thanks for watching.